Oh, hi. Are you looking for a story? I'm actually was just looking for a place to tell the story, and I'm here at the World Storytelling Cafe, and I managed to find round the back of it there's a library. Well, of course, the great thing is now, because of the crisis, that the libraries are closed, but luckily there's a door that connects the library to the cafe. So I've come in here and it's quiet, and I thought, well, I could share with you one of my stories. This story comes from Iran, and I happened to be in Tehran a couple of years ago as part of the Canoe International Storytelling Festival. And when I told the story there, they said actually it's meant to be a true story based on a shah from a long, long, long time ago. And this particular shah, he was much more of a worrier rather than a warrior. He worried about his people, because Iran is a place of great climatic extremes. In the summer it's incredibly hot and dry, and in the winter really cold, and he wondered how the poor people might suffer because of that. It's also a land that is prone to have earthquakes, and he worried that if an earthquake came in the middle of the night, their homes might collapse and many innocent people would suffer and die. And then he thought to himself, but just a minute, I'm the Shah. I live here in this enormous palace. I have many servants and cooks and guards to look after me and make my life easy. But how about the poor people? How do they manage? And so one day he decided that he would take off his royal regalia, and instead that he would go out into the city and in disguise as a poor person. And that's what he did. He spent the day walking through the city, seeing in the markets, by the mosque, how people managed. And late in the day, he was in the poorest quarter of the city, making his way down a very narrow alleyway between mud brick walls, and careful to mind where he put his feet, because it was certainly not the cleanest street that he had ever walked upon. And he came to a small little hut at the end of the lane, and being curious, he looked in through the window, and he was just in time to see the occupant, a young man, take out his mat and to lay out his mat on the floor, because he was about to have his evening meal. Now at that moment the young man looked up and saw at his window a stranger. He didn't know it was the Shah. He'd never seen the Shah, and why on earth would the Shah, of all people, be in his part of the city? No, he just saw a man like himself who looked very hungry, and indeed the Shah was, because he'd been out all day. So when the man beckoned for him to come and join him, the Shah happily walked around, kicked off his sandals, and sat down on the mat. The young man brought out a round loaf of bread and broke it in half and gave it to him along with a cup of water. The Shah, still in disguise, thanked him and said, "Oh, so, thank you very much. What is it that you do?" The young man said, I'm a cobbler. I repair shoes, and today was a really good day. I repaired enough shoes that I was able to buy this delicious loaf of bread. "Well," said his guest, "I am delighted for you, of course. But what about tomorrow? What if you aren't able to repair enough shoes? What will you do then?" And the young man looked up from where he was eating and said, I don't worry about that," he said. "Day by day I have my faith, and all will be well." And the Shah thought to himself, really? And after he'd finished his meal, he thanked the man and took his leave. But as he walked back to the palace, he thought to himself, day by day I have my faith, and all will be well. We'll see about that. And he decided to test the young man. Well, the next day the cobbler was there at the market, and he was just setting out his stall with his tools and so on, when he saw one of the soldiers, a palace guard, come and paste a large poster on the wall beside the market, and it said, "By order of the Shah, do not repair shoes. When your shoes break, buy new ones." Oh my goodness me, thought the cobbler. What am I going to do? This is my livelihood. I repair shoes. And as he was wondering what on earth he could do, he saw on the far side of the market there was an old woman who was struggling carrying 2 large buckets of water, for now it was the summer, and people, being so hot, had to carry water from the well to their homes. So the cobbler, being a kind young man, put away his tools and went over to the woman and offered to help. And she said, oh, thank you so much, sir. That's very kind of you indeed. Thank you, she said. I live just along at the end of the road there. So the young man bent down and he picked up the 2 buckets of water and he carried them, and they were heavy. And I have to say, the old woman didn't just live at the end of the road, no, it was around the corner and up a fairly steep hill, and her house was an apartment at the top of several flights of stairs. So when he finally got there, he was glad to put those down, and he was just about to leave when the woman said, no, stop, and took out a handkerchief, and from the handkerchief she took out 3 small coins to thank him for his work. No, thank you, for you have shown me what I can do. And from there he went straight to the well and became a water carrier. And as I said, because it was the summer, many people needed help bringing water to their homes, and he did very well. And at the end of the day, as he laid out his mat in order to have his meal, who should he see there at the window of his little hut but the same stranger that he saw last night, the man that you and I know was the Shah. And he beckoned him in. And again he came, kicked off his sandals and sat down, and was very surprised when the young man produced not only a round loaf of bread, but also some goat's cheese. You've obviously done very well. Indeed I did, said the cobbler. But I thought, said the Shah, that the Shah had said that you couldn't repair shoes anymore. Yeah, said the cobbler, strange. And he explained how he'd become a water carrier and had done very well. Well, I'm very pleased for you, said his guest. But what about tomorrow? What if you don't get to carry enough buckets of water? What will you do then? And the young man, as he popped some goat's cheese into his mouth, said, I told you yesterday, I don't worry about that. Day by day, I have my faith, and all will be well. Sure, said the Shah, and finished his rather pleasant meal, and when he had done so, he said farewell, but again, as he walked home, he thought to himself, no, I don't believe this. Day by day, I have my faith. All will be well. No. And he resolved to continue testing the young man. Well, the next day, the cobbler, now a water carrier, went to the well, and he was just about to help a young boy with a bucket that was almost the size of the boy, when a guard appeared and said, stop. Is that bucket for you? Is the water for your own consumption? No, said the water carrier. I'm helping this boy here to help it because it's a long way. Said the guard. By orders of the Shah, due to the current water shortage, you may only fetch water for your own consumption. What to do? Well, at that moment, as the water carrier stood beside the well wondering what to do, a man came up carrying a heavy pile of firewood upon his back. And when he got there, he took it over, and he laid it down. And he accepted very gratefully the cup of water that the water carrier passed to him. And he drank, and he said, that wood is so heavy. And he turned to the water carrier and he said, would you mind helping me? And the cobbler turned water carrier said, sure, how can I help? Well, he said, if you'll help me carry that wood to the market and help me to sell it, then I'll split whatever I make 50-50 with you. "It's a deal," said the water carrier, and he helped to pick up that firewood, and they took it to the market. And as I said, it was the summer, when prices for wood were low, and so many people wanted to buy their supply now rather than wait for the winter. And so they did very well indeed. And at the end of the day, as he went and laid out his mat, who should be there at the window but the same gentleman who had been the previous 2 nights. And he came in, kicked off his sandals, and sat down, and not only a loaf of bread and some goat's cheese, but also some juicy peaches. "Well, you've obviously had a very good day indeed," said his guest. "Oh, yes, I have," said the cobbler, who explained how he'd now become a seller of firewood. "Well, of course, I'm very happy for you," said his guest, "but what about tomorrow? What if, you're not able to sell firewood? What will you do then?" And again the cobbler replied and said, "Please, will you stop worrying? As I've told you, I don't think about these things, and these peaches really are delicious. As I say, day by day I have my faith, and all will be well." Really? And as the Shah made his way home after, admittedly, another very pleasant meal indeed, he was thinking, no, day by day I have my faith and all will be well. No, I don't believe it. And he determined to test this man's faith yet again. So the next day, as he stood at the trees about to cut down some more firewood, a group of soldiers rode up and said, "Stop! These trees belong to the Shah. You cannot cut them down. But you, and you," said the soldier, pointing at the firewood seller, "come to the palace." And the young man was marched to the palace, where he was given a uniform and a magnificent sword, a sword with a silver blade inside a silver scabbard. And all day he marched up and down and learnt how to follow commands. And at the end of the day, when the sergeant-at-arms said, "Dismiss," our young hero went up to him and said, "Excuse me, Sergeant, can I have my pay?" The sergeant looked at him and said, "What? Are you crazy?" He said, "You work for the Shah. The Shah only pays at the end of the month." Well, all of you who work for government know the same, right? Oh, only pays at the end of the month. And as the cobbler, now palace guard, walked home, he thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive to the end of the month? And as he made his way home towards the poor quarter of the city, suddenly he realized he was passing a pawnbroker's shop. And he thought, of course, I know. And he went inside and he took out this sword with the silver blade and he said to the man, "How much will you pay me for this silver blade?" Well, silver blade you don't get very often. And so he was given a very princely sum. And he disconnected the blade from the handle and gave the blade to the pawnbroker. Then he made his way to the market and then went home. Now, the first thing he did when he got home was to get a piece of wood, and with his knife he carefully shaped that piece of wood and made for himself a wooden blade. And funnily enough, this story is called the wooden sword. And he attached that wooden blade to the handle, so that now he could take the sword and put it into the scabbard and have it there at his belt, and no one would be any the wiser. And again, when he had done that and he was just laying out his mat in time for his dinner, who should be there at the window but his newfound friend? "Come in, come in." And again, the gentleman came in, kicked off his sandals and sat down on the mat. "So, how was your day?" Oh, I had a really good day. I became a soldier in the palace guard. Ah, a soldier in the palace guard. Yeah, and look. And the young man turned and took out not only a loaf of bread and some more goat's cheese and delicious peaches, but also a delicious dessert made of almonds and honey. Wow, this is a feast, said his guest. But surely, when you work for the Shah, I thought the Shah only paid at the end of the month. I know, said the cobbler, now soldier. But listen, don't tell anybody. Because if anybody found out, particularly if the Shah found out, I'd be in big trouble. But look, he said, and he pulled out the wooden sword. He said, what I did was, I pawned the silver blade. And so I made this wooden replica instead. And then at the end of the month, I'll be able, when I get my pay, I can buy the sword blade back. Yes, said the Shah. I think the Shah would be very angry if he knew what you had done. I know, but he'll never find out, it's all right. But what if tomorrow there was a war? What if tomorrow you had to draw your sword? What would you do? Oh, will you please stop worrying? If I've told you once, I've told you at least 4 times. Day by day, I have my faith, and all will be well. Go, tuck in. And the Shah did, and he had a very good meal. But on his way home, he was thinking, no, I am going to test this young man's faith one more time. Well, the next day, the soldier was there on parade in the palace. And as he stood there, suddenly the great gates were thrown open, and in came an unruly mob. And they were dragging a man, and they were shouting, thief, thief, thief. And they gathered as a great crowd at the foot of the steps leading up to the main door of the palace. And at that moment, the doors of the palace opened, and there stood the Shah, but as himself in all his royal regalia. Instantly the crowd fell silent, and he walked down the steps and addressed the sergeant at arms and says, what is the meaning of this? Sir, this man is a thief. He stole a bag of rice, and now the people demand justice. And the Shah turned and looked at the man who the crowd had thrust to his knees and said, stealing is a very serious crime and must be punished accordingly. You, he said, pointing at the cobbler, you draw your sword and chop off this man's head now. And the cobbler, he dared look at the Shah. He thought, oh my goodness me, draw my sword. But if I draw my sword, the Shah will see that the blade is made of wood, and he'll probably chop off my head. But at that moment, to make matters even worse, the man who was accused of being a thief broke free from those who were restraining him and threw himself on his knees at the cobbler's feet and said, please, believe me, I am innocent. It was another man who stole the bag of rice, and he ran away from the people as they chased him. He rounded a corner, he saw me there, he threw me the bag of rice, I caught it, and he ran off, and the people came round the corner, saw me, and assumed I was the one. But I am innocent. And the cobbler looked into his eyes and saw that it was true. But at that moment, the Shah said again, soldier, I have given you an order. Draw your sword and chop off this man's head. What could the cobbler do? If he drew the sword and gave the game away, he would have his head chopped off. But if he refused the order, he'd still have his head chopped off. And then he raised his hands to the heavens and said, Inshallah, if this man is guilty May I chop off his head with one blow from my sword. But if this man is innocent, may the blade of my sword be turned to wood. And he drew his sword, shah, and the people went, wow, because indeed there had been a miracle, and his blade had turned to wood. And the Shah looked at him and smiled, for he knew that this young man was a very special young man indeed. And then he turned and looked at the accused and said, "You are innocent, you may go." And he reached into his pocket and gave him some silver coins for his trouble. And after the sergeant-at-arms had escorted all the crowd out from the palace grounds and barred the gate, the soldier, as he stood there, the Shah turned to the young man and said, "Soldier, do you not know who I am?" And the soldier said, "Yes, sir, you are the Shah." "Indeed I am," said the Shah, "but I am also the man who has sat and had dinner with you these past 4 nights." And the cobbler looked up and looked at the Shah and saw in his eyes that it was so. "Come," said the Shah, "I would like you to come and stay here in the palace with me and be one of my advisors, for I think I have much to learn from you." And the cobbler bowed and said, "Certainly, your majesty. And the first thing I shall teach you is this: day by day I have my faith, and all will be well." Right, now for my next story, I think I'd like to find somewhere else a little bit more intimate, within the library, and I'm told that there's actually a secret door behind me. Yeah, and all I've got to do, just like this. Look, you see? Wow, and they've even got a chair for me already. Fantastic. Find myself a seat. Yeah, okay. So, 2 very short stories from India. And funnily enough, there was a water cellar in my last story, and there's a water cellar in this one. But this story comes not from Iran, but probably, I think, from a very dry part of India, maybe somewhere like Rajasthan. And this water cellar, he had 2 big pots, clay pots. One which was brand new and perfect, and the other one which was rather old and dilapidated and had in it a rather large crack. So that whenever he had filled up the 2 pots at the well, which was outside the town, as he walked back carrying the 2 pots, this one would drip, 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 with the result that when they got to the market, while the new pot was always full to the brim, the second pot was severely depleted and was barely half full. And as a result of that, of course, it meant that the water cellar had to make more trips backwards and forwards from the marketplace to the well to refill in order to meet the supply, because he only had 1.5 and not 2 pots full of water to sell. And one day, as they were at the well, the brand new pot rather snootily looked at the old one and said, "Really, I don't know why the master keeps you. You're such a waste. We wouldn't have to keep coming out here so often if only you didn't drip, drip, drip." Well, naturally, the old crackpot didn't feel too good about that, and he turned to the water cellar and asked him, "Master, why is it that you haven't got rid of me and got yourself a new pot like that one? Because I waste so much water." "Oh, do you?" said the water seller. Well, that's a good question, but maybe as we walk back to the town now, as we go, you look around, and when we get to the market, you can tell me what you see." Okay. And so the water seller picked up the 2 pots and he carried them back to the market. And as he was setting up his stall and waiting for his first customers to arrive, he turned to the crackpot and said, "Well, what did you see?" "What did I see? Well, nothing. It's just like desert, sand and more sand and sand." "Oh, really? Is that all?" Well, no, there were some flowers beside the road. Oh, really? Said the water seller. Flowers? In the middle of the desert? How interesting. Were they on both sides of the road? No, said the crackpot. Only on my side of the road. Yes, said the water seller. You see, when I saw that you had a crack and that you were actually drip, 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 I went to my friend there, the seed seller here in the market, and I bought some seeds and I scattered them along the roadside, your side of the road. And every time that we come back from the well, you generously water them. And so now, as I'm walking back to the village through this dry desert, I see the beautiful colours of the flowers. I smell their fragrance and it makes me feel very happy. And sometimes I even pluck some of the flowers and I bring them home and I put them on our table and they cheer up my wife and my family. So just because you have a crack doesn't mean that you are useless at all. And the second story also comes from India, and there is water in it, sort of. And it's about a guru, a very wise man indeed, and every day hundreds of people would come to his ashram in order to ask the guru questions for his advice, for his wisdom on how they might deal with their problems. Now, the guru had many followers, disciples if you like, who would be there to help to manage all the people and so on. And there was one particular disciple who loved to listen to the guru and his wisdom. And one day, after all the supplicants had left the ashram, the disciple turned to the guru and said, "Master, why is it when people come to you with their problems seeking your advice, instead of giving them the advice, you always tell them stories? Why don't you just give them the advice straight out? Wouldn't that be a lot simpler?" And the guru said, yes, that's a good question, he said. But you know what? He said, I am rather thirsty. Probably from telling too many stories, said the disciple. Yes, possibly, said the guru. Would you mind going to the kitchen and fetching me some water? Of course, master, of course. And the disciple ran to the kitchen and took down a beautiful brass pot and filled it with some cool, refreshing water and brought it to the master and said, "Here," and offered him the pot. And the guru did not take the pot, but looked at it and said, "But why have you brought me a pot when I only asked for water?" "Oh, master," said the disciple, "how can I bring you the water if I don't put it into a pot?" And the guru said, "Yes, and how can I give the people wisdom if I don't put it into a story?" Yes. I think I've been in this library a little too long and I'm feeling a bit of, like COVID cabin fever. I just need to get outside and get some fresh air. And fortunately, behind this library, which as you know is behind the World Storytelling Cafe, there happens to be this beautiful grove of Japanese bamboo. So all I've got to do is just kind of roll this out of the way and wow, look at that. Here I am in my Japanese garden with a story from Japan. And this is about a young man named Kosaku. And it begins as he is walking along that long road from the city of Kyoto back towards his ancestral village. And as he is walking, pakapan, 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 he carries upon his back a bag in which he has packed some of his costumes and his masks, because he is a student learning how to become an actor in the No Theatre. He's very lucky because he was just a farmer, but he managed to find a man, a sensei, who was willing to teach him even though he was not his son, and this thing was handed usually from father to son, father to son. But the sensei had seen in Kosaku some skill. And that morning, the sensei had found Kosaku reading a letter sent to him by the headman of his village, in which he had shared the news that his mother
was gravely ill. And the sensei had said, no, no, go, go, go. You must go at once to your mother and to bring with him some of his costumes and masks. So now, as he walked, pakapan, 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 not only the weight of his costumes, but also his worries on his shoulders, he passed a small wayside stall. He thought, I have still a long way to go, and I am hungry. So he stopped, had a simple meal, and when he had finished, the woman who ran the stall asked him where he was going. Oh, he said, I'm going over the mountain, back to my village. Oh, she said, you're going over the mountain? Yes, he said. Oh, you're going over the mountain through the forest? Yes, said Kusaku, for that was the way the road went. You're going over the mountain through the forest when night is falling? Yes, said Kusaku. But, young man, aren't you afraid of the uabami? And Kusaku was, excuse me, the what? The uabami. No, what's that? Oh, she said. Oh, it's a very long, fierce snake. And it creeps up on people, you see, unsuspecting, and then it coils around them and squeezes them and crushes them to death. Oh, really, said Kusaku, well, thanks for the warning, but my friends say I'm a very fast runner, so as soon as I see that snake, I'm going to run away from it. Oh, no, 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 said the old woman. No, you see, the uabami can change shape, and it creeps up on you, and then it will coil itself around you and crush you. Yeah, thank you, said Kusaku. I get the picture, thank you. But what could he do? He was worried that his mother was dying and he had to get home. And so he paid the woman and shouldered his back, and he carried on walking. Pakapan, 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 up that long road through the forest as night fell and the moon rose and shone down through the trees. And as he walked, pakapan, 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 suddenly he heard a sound. A twig snapped. Could it be the... He turned and looked. No, it wasn't a snake. No, it was just an old man, a woodcutter, bent almost double under this heavy pile of logs that he was carrying. Oh, you gave me a shock, said Kusaku. And the old man said, a shock, and stepped out from the trees onto the road. Yes, I thought you were that terrible snake. What terrible snake? Said the old man, coming a little closer. Oh, apparently there is this terrible snake that it kind of creeps up on people and then it coils around them and like crushes them to death. Oh, said the old man, it crushes them, does it? Yes, let me see, it's called the, you're in the army. No, it's called the, just a minute, it's called the, your barmy? No, it's called the, it's the uabami, said the old man, who was now standing very close indeed to Kusaku. Oh, really, said the, that's it, yes, yes. How did you know that? Because, said the old man, I am the uabami. And in an instant, he had changed and become the snake. And it was coiling and squeezing, and it reared up until its great head was there with its long, forked tongue. And Kusaku, his mind, even as he was being squeezed, his mind was racing. And suddenly, he remembered a story that his mother used to tell him when he was just a boy about a fox that could also change shape and always managed to outwit the snake. You can't eat me, said Kusaku. I'm a fox. And the snake said, a fox. I hate foxes. Their meat is so sour and salty. And he began to uncoil and loosen himself from around Kusaku. And said, oh, well, that's it, yes, well, you see, I'm a fox, so I'm just going to be off. Bye. Stop, said the snake. If you are a fox, then you can change shape. Change shape for me and prove that you are a fox. And Kusaku said, oh, change shape. All right then. And he went behind a tree and he took out one of his costumes and one of his masks and changed himself into a samurai warrior. Okuruzoza! Oh yes, said the Urbami. Yes, and perhaps you are a fox. But if you are a fox, you can change into more than one thing. Show me something else. And Kusaku said, very well. And again he went behind the tree and he put on another mask and he became a beautiful young lady from the court. Yes. Now I begin to believe that you are a fox. Please change for me into something else. Very well, said Kusaku. One more thing, just for you. And again, he went behind the tree and he put on another costume. And another mask. And became a comical servant from the Kyogen. Meet it. Yes, said the Ubami. Yes, I believe you. You really are a fox. And so, Kusaku and the Ubami traveled on together. Zuru, 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 pakapan, 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 pakapan. And all the time Kusaku was thinking, how could he turn this strange encounter to his advantage? And suddenly he had an idea, and turning to the Urbani he said, well, since you and I are now friends, yes, why don't we share secrets? Secrets? Yes, for example, what is it that you're most scared of? Scared? I'm not scared of anything. Really? Well, the only thing I can't stand is tobacco juice. Really? What's the problem with tobacco juice? Apart from the fact it's so stinky, it's poisonous. If that brown liquid goes on to my skin, my scales, I will die. Oh, how sad. Yes. And what about you? What are you afraid of? Oh, me. What am I afraid of? Oh, it's gold. Gold. Why are you scared of gold? I have lots of gold, but I'm not scared of it. I stole it all. Oh, really? Why am I scared of the gold? Oh, it's the colour. Oh, that bright colour, it's so painful, dazzling on the eyes. Oh, and the sound. Oh, the sound. Oh, that when it goes chink and chink, chink, it's so scary. At that moment, the sun came up. And the moment that it did so, the snake slithered away and disappeared into its cave. And Kusaku marked where it was. and then pressed on walking to his village. And when he arrived, he there looked after his mother, I'm pleased to say, after 2 to 3 weeks of his kindness and his good cooking, she was able to make a good recovery. And being a good student, Kosaku realized that he should now go back to Kyoto and resume his studies. But first, he wanted to deal with the Uwabami. And so he went to his friends in the village and asked them to go with him to the forest, where they gathered tobacco leaves and put them into a great pot of water. And as the water began to bubble and boil, those tobacco leaves turned that fresh mountain water into a thick, turgid, foul-smelling soup. And they carried it like liquid dung up the mountainside to the mouth of the cave, where they poured it on the ground. And no sooner had they done so than, yes! There came a great cry from inside the cave, and Kosaku and all his friends turned and fled. As the Uwabami came out and looked, and recoiled in fear at the sight of all that tobacco juice. They knew that it must leave at once, but before doing so, it had to get its revenge. That night, Kosaku told his mother that she must stay with a neighbor for her own safekeeping. And after she had gone, he went to the window and closed the shutters and barred them. He went to the door and barred the door. And then he waited and he waited. And late in the night, he heard a sound. Zuru zuru, zuru zuru, zuru zuru. He went to the shutters and looked out between the crack and saw the great snake slither across the yard towards his front door. It came to the pillar that supported the roof over the porch, and it began to coil up and up and up and onto the roof of the house. The snake was so big and heavy that the timbers of the roof groaned and creaked as it made its way, oh no, towards the chimney. And this was still the end of summer. There was no fire in the fireplace. As the snake made its way towards the chimney, zuru zuru, and stopped. And as Kosaku recoiled in a corner of the room, suddenly, he heard a sound. Chink, chink, chink. Oh no, he said, not gold! Chink, 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 please, no more gold! I can't stand the sound! Chink, 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 no, please! Chink, 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 no more gold! Chink, 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 chink. And in the morning, long after the Uwabami had slithered away, never to be seen again, when Kosaku unbarred the door and opened it, the sun streamed in and fell on the fireplace, where there was a pile of gold far larger than he had seen even in his dreams. And being a good and kind young man, Kosaku took that great pile and divided it into 4 equal parts. The first he gave to his mother, that she might continue to live well and happily in her remaining years. The second part he gave to all his friends in the village to thank them for helping him to rid the village of the Uwabami. The third portion he brought home and he gave to his sensei, his teacher, his way of saying thank you for all the training and skill that his sensei had so generously shared. And only the fourth and final part did he keep for himself, for indeed the masks and the costumes are very expensive. And finally the day came when Kosaku was ready to make his debut upon the No stage, and his sensei said, "You know, Kosaku, you cannot perform as yourself. You need to have a stage name. How do you wish to be known?" And Kosaku smiled and said, "Oh, that is easy. I wish to be known as the little fox." Ta. Sa.
Did you enjoy that storyteller? Of course you did. And if you enjoyed it, like the minstrels of old, we're passing round the hat. And if you have some, whether it's paper or coin, our storytellers would appreciate what you put in. Every penny you put in goes directly to that storyteller through paper. All you have to do is go to worldstorytellingcafe.com. Click on today's stories or click on that storyteller, and there'll be a hat below the story. And you can just drop a little in that hat. Well, thank you for listening. And if you can afford it, we'd appreciate it.